The alarm klaxon screamed through the corridors of the Galactic Defense Station Omega 7, their piercing wail cutting through the usual hum of activity like a blade through silk. Admiral Kextara's forearms moved in practiced precision across her command console, her scaled fingers dancing over holographic displays that painted an increasingly grim picture of their situation. "Status report," she barked, her translator rendering her natural clicking sounds in a standard galactic common tongue. "Vorthan fleet emerging from hyperspace. Admiral," Lieutenant Zill reported, his normally steady voice cracking slightly. The young officer's blue skin had taken on a sickly pale hue as he studied his sensors. Initial count shows by the ancestors, over 3,000 vessels of various classes. Kextara felt her blood chill. The Vorthans were the stuff of nightmares, a species that had carved a bloody path across 17 star systems in the past 5 years. They were methodical, ruthless, and utterly without mercy. Their technology was superior to most races in the Galactic Coalition. Their tactics were flawless, and their hunger for conquest seemed infinite. "How long until they reach our position?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "At their current approach vector and speed, approximately 6 hours, Admiral." 6 hours. Kextara closed her primary eyes and let her secondary pair focus on the tactical display. Station Omega 7 was humanity's closest neighbor, sitting at a critical junction between human space and the core worlds of the Coalition. If it fell, the Vorthans would have a clear path to both Earth and Centauri Prime, the Coalition's capital. The irony wasn't lost on her. For decades, the various species of the Coalition had viewed humans with a mixture of curiosity, amusement, and barely concealed disdain. They were the newest members, barely a century into spaceflight when first contact was made. Their technology was primitive, their ships were crude, and their diplomatic skills were questionable at best. But there were stories, whispered tales that circulated through the darker corners of galactic society. Stories about human unpredictability, about their capacity for violence when cornered, about their disturbing tendency to find ways to win battles that should have been impossible to survive. Most dismissed these as exaggerations, propaganda spread by humans themselves to seem more threatening than they actually were. "Admiral," Communications Officer THYSS interrupted her thoughts. "We're receiving transmissions from the approaching fleet." On screen, the main display flickered to life, revealing the face that had haunted the nightmares of Coalition citizens for years. Warlord Vrextak was an imposing figure even by Vorthan standards, standing nearly 3 meters tall with the characteristic metallic exoskeleton that gave his species their fearsome reputation. His 6 eyes glowed with a cold, predatory intelligence, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Coalition forces," he began without preamble. "You will surrender this station immediately and submit to Vorthan rule. Your resistance is futile. Your fleets have been scattered, your worlds burn, and your so-called unity crumbles before our advance. You have 1 hour to comply, or we will demonstrate why resistance to the Vorthan Empire is an exercise in futility." The transmission cut off, leaving the command center in stunned silence. "Our defensive capabilities?" Kextara asked quietly. "Minimal, Admiral," came the reply from her tactical officer. "We have the station's defensive grid, 12 automated defense platforms, and—" He paused, checking his display again. "The Coalition Cruiser Harmony's Edge under Captain Moldar. Total defensive strength, roughly equivalent to maybe 50 standard vessels. Against 3,000. The mathematics were simple and terrifying. "Have we heard anything from Coalition Command?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Negative, Admiral. All long-range communications have been jammed. The Vorthans have cut us off completely." Kextara stared at the tactical display, watching the red dots that represented the approaching Vorthan fleet. Each dot represented death, conquest, the end of everything they had built in this sector. Her mind raced through possibilities, strategies, anything that might give them even the slightest chance of survival. "Admiral," Lieutenant Zill spoke up hesitantly, "there is one option we haven't considered." "Speak freely, Lieutenant." The young officer's nervousness was palpable as he continued. "The human system. Earth is only 4 light hours away. If we could get a message through their hyperspace relay network." The suggestion hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Around the command center, Officers exchanged glances that ranged from skeptical to horrified. Humans were barely more than an oddity in galactic politics, a young species that had stumbled into interstellar travel through what most consider to be pure luck rather than genuine advancement. The humans? Captain Moldar's voice crackled through the comm system from his ship. Admiral, with all due respect, what could they possibly do that the combined might of the Coalition hasn't already attempted? Their entire fleet consists of maybe 200 vessels, most of which are exploration ships with minimal armament. It was a fair point. The human military was small, their technology was generations behind the major powers, and they had no significant battle experience beyond minor skirmishes with pirates and the occasional border dispute. The idea that they could somehow turn the tide against the Vorthans seemed absurd. But something nagged at Kextara's mind. Stories her grandfather had told her when she was young. Tales from the early days of Coalition expansion, when they had encountered species that seemed harmless until pushed too far. He had always warned her to be cautious of the quiet ones, the ones who watched and learned before acting. There are protocols, she said slowly, emergency protocols that allow any Coalition member to request immediate military assistance in the event of imminent system-wide threat. Admiral, her tactical officer interjected. Even if they responded immediately, the humans couldn't possibly field enough ships to make a difference. And their technology? I know their specifications, Kextara cut him off. But there's something else. Something we've overlooked. She paused, calling up files on her personal display. Computer, access Coalition intelligence files on human military encounters. Authorization, Kextara Alpha 7. The holographic display shifted, showing a series of incident reports that most Coalition officers had never bothered to read. Kextara had studied them years ago, more out of curiosity than any practical concern. The Rigel incident, 15 years ago. Pirates attempted to raid a human mining operation. Superior numbers, better ships, caught the humans completely off guard. She highlighted the relevant passages. The pirates were not just defeated. They were eliminated. Completely. Not a single vessel escaped to tell the tale. Pirates are one thing, Admiral, Captain Moldar pointed out. The Vorthans are an entirely different threat. The Proxima border conflict, 8 years ago, Kextara continued, pulling up another file. 3 Zilithian destroyers attempted to claim a human colony world. The humans had one outdated patrol craft and system. She paused for effect. The Zilithian ships were found 3 days later, drifting dead in space. The human ship was damaged, but functional. Lieutenant Zill frowned at his display. How did they manage that? The Zilithians had superior firepower and shielding. That's what everyone asked. The official report was classified by human authorities. The Zilithians refused to discuss it publicly, citing tactical sensitivity. Kextara closed the files and looked around the command center. There have been 17 similar incidents over the past 20 years. In every case, human forces were outnumbered and outgunned. In every case, their opponents either retreated after minimal engagement or were found destroyed with their attackers, suffering minimal casualties. The command center had fallen silent, except for the constant background hum of the station systems. Officers exchanged glances, some skeptical, others beginning to look thoughtful. Admiral, Communications Officer THYSS spoke up. There's something else. I've been monitoring Coalition communication networks, and there are some unusual patterns. Explain. Standard emergency frequencies are carrying coded transmissions. I can't break the encryption, but the routing suggests they're being relayed through human communication networks. The volume has increased dramatically since the Vorthan offensive began. Kextara felt a chill run down her spine. It could be coincidence. It could be the humans simply trying to stay informed about the war that was steadily approaching their borders. Or it could be something else entirely. There's another option, she said quietly. Something that very few people know about. She called up another set of files, these ones marked with the highest classification levels. 23 years ago, shortly after humanity joined the Coalition, there was a proposal submitted by the human ambassador. A mutual defense protocol that would allow any Coalition member to formally request assistance from any other member in case of existential threat. That's standard Coalition law, Admiral, her tactical officer pointed out. Yes, but this proposal had additional clauses. Specific provisions that would grant the responding force complete tactical authority over the engagement, regardless of rank or seniority of local commanders. Kextara highlighted the relevant sections. The humans insisted on these clauses. At the time, most council members thought it was just human inexperience with galactic politics. The provisions were approved because everyone assumed they would never be relevant. The implications were staggering. If they formally requested human assistance under these protocols, they would essentially be handing control of the entire battle to whatever force the humans sent. It was a level of trust that no species had ever granted to the humans. Admiral, Captain Moldar's voice was carefully controlled. Are you seriously suggesting that we turn command of our defense over to a species that has never fought a major space battle? I'm suggesting that we're about to be destroyed by an enemy we can't defeat with conventional tactics, Kextara replied firmly. At this point, unconventional options may be our only hope. She stood and walked to the main display, staring at the approaching Vorthan fleet. Each red dot represented death and conquest, the end of everything they had sworn to protect. But somewhere beyond the edge of the display, for light hours away, was a species that had somehow managed to survive and thrive despite every prediction to the contrary. Lieutenant Zill, prepare a formal request for assistance. Use the emergency protocols established in Coalition Treaty 847. B. Mark it as an existential system threat requiring immediate response. Yes, Admiral. Should I specify the nature of the assistance we're requesting? Kextara was quiet for a long moment, watching the Vorthan fleet grow larger on the tactical display. No, let them decide how to respond. According to the treaty provisions, that's their prerogative once they accept the request. As Lieutenant Zill began composing the message, Kextara found herself thinking about those old stories again. Tales of species that seemed harmless until threatened, of creatures that appeared weak until cornered. Her grandfather had always said that the most dangerous predator was the one that let you think you were the hunter right up until the moment it struck. Message ready for transmission, Admiral. Send it. All frequencies, maximum power, priority alpha routing. The message shot out from Station Omega-7's communication array, racing through hyperspace toward a small blue-green world that most of the galaxy had dismissed as insignificant. As it traveled, Kextara couldn't shake the feeling that they had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. In 6 hours, they would either be dead or witness to something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same. The waiting began. The response came faster than anyone had expected. Admiral Kextara was reviewing defensive positions when Communications Officer THYSS nearly fell out of his chair. Admiral, incoming transmission from Sol System. It's marked as an official response to our assistance request. Already? That was less than 2 hours ago. Yes, ma'am. The transmission is heavily encrypted and carries human military authorization codes. Shall I put it through? Kextara straightened her uniform and nodded. On screen, all stations maintain current alert status. The holographic display shimmered to life, revealing a human face that immediately commanded attention despite its unremarkable features. The man appeared to be in his 50s, with graying hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of both intelligence and experience. His uniform was simple, dark blue with minimal decoration, but something about his bearing suggested authority that went far beyond rank insignia. This is Admiral Chun of the Terran Defense Force, the human said without preamble. His voice was calm, almost conversational, as if he were discussing the weather rather than a life-or-death crisis. We have received your formal request for assistance under Coalition Treaty 847B. We accept. A collective intake of breath rippled through the command center. Kextara felt her heart skip a beat. She had hoped for a response, but the speed and directness of the acceptance was unexpected. In accordance with the treaty provisions, Admiral Chun continued, tactical command of this engagement will transfer to Terran forces upon our arrival. Estimated time to your position is 43 minutes. Until then, maintain defensive posture and do not engage the Vorthan fleet under any circumstances. The transmission paused, and Admiral Chin's expression became more serious. Admiral Kextara, I want to be very clear about what you've just requested. Once we arrive and assume command, there will be no negotiation, no second-guessing, and no interference with our tactical decisions. The treaty provisions you've invoked give us complete authority over this engagement. Are you prepared to accept that level of trust? Kextara found her voice after a moment. Admiral Chun, we are facing imminent destruction by a force we cannot hope to defeat. At this point, trust is all we have left. Something changed in the human's expression a slight shift that was difficult to read, but somehow reassuring. Understood. Stand by for our arrival. Chin out. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. 43 minutes? Lieutenant Zill whispered. How was that possible? Even with their fastest ships, the journey from Seoul to our position should take at least 6 hours. Captain Moldar's voice crackled through the comm system. Admiral, I'm reading multiple hyperspace emergent signatures. Large ones. Whatever the humans are sending, it's substantial. Kextara's tactical officer was frantically checking his instruments. Confirmed, Admiral. I'm reading at least 50 distinct signatures, possibly more. They're big, Admiral. Much larger than anything in the human fleet specifications we have on file. How much larger? Some of these readings suggest vessels in excess of 15 kilometers in length. That's impossible. The largest human ship on record is barely 2 kilometers long. The next 43 minutes stretched like an eternity. The Vorthan fleet continued its relentless approach, their formation perfect and menacing. Warlord Vrextak had transmitted twice more, each message more threatening than the last, but Kextara had followed Admiral Chen's instructions and maintained radio silence. Admiral, her sensor operator called out, voice tight with excitement and fear, multiple contacts emerging from hyperspace. Distance by the ancestors. The main display automatically adjusted its scale as the newcomers appeared, and even experienced officers gasped at what they saw. Ships were materializing from hyperspace in perfect formation, but these were not the vessels that anyone expected from the human fleet. The smallest of them dwarfed even coalition capital ships. Dark gray and black, their hulls were angular and predatory, covered in what appeared to be armor plating thick enough to stop planetary bombardment. Weapons systems bristled from every surface, and energy readings suggested power cores that defied conventional physics. How many? Kextara asked quietly. Initial count shows 237 vessels, Admiral. But that's not the strangest part. Explain. Ma'am, these ships aren't broadcasting any identification signatures. No registry numbers, no fleet designations, nothing. They're completely dark except for their tactical transponders, which are broadcasting on frequencies I've never seen before. As they watched, the mysterious human fleet arranged itself between Station Omega 7 and the approaching Vorthans. The formation was unlike anything in standard tactical doctrine, seeming almost organic in its fluid movements. Incoming transmission, Communications Officer THYSS announced. It's from the lead vessel. On screen, Admiral Chen appeared again, but his backdrop had changed dramatically. Behind him, Kextara could see a command bridge that was clearly built for war. Dark surfaces, multiple displays showing tactical information, and personnel moving with the efficiency of a well-trained military unit. But there was something else, something that sent a chill down her spine. The humans on that bridge moved with the confidence of veterans. These were not explorers or merchants playing at being soldiers. These were warriors. Admiral Kextara, Chen began, tactical command is now transferred to Terran forces. For the record, I am Admiral Chun of the Terran Defense Force, commanding Task Force Prometheus. We are assuming responsibility for the defense of this system. Admiral Chun, Kextara responded, I have to ask, those ships, they're not in any coalition database. What exactly are we looking at? Chen's expression remained neutral. Those are ships of the Terran Defense Force, Admiral. As to their specifications, that information is classified under the same treaty provisions that granted us tactical authority. What you need to know is that they are here to protect coalition territory and citizens. But the size, the technology, how do we not know about this? Because you never asked the right questions. Chen's voice carried a note of something that might have been amusement. Admiral, your intelligence services have extensive files on our exploration vessels, our merchant marine, and our colonial patrol craft. Those represent about 15% of actual Terran space capability. The rest has been what your intelligence analysts would call compartmentalized. The implications hit Kextara like a physical blow. You mean to tell me that for 20 years, the Coalition has only seen a fraction of human space capability? That's exactly what I'm telling you. The ships you're looking at are part of what we call the Deep Fleet. They've been out there, beyond the edges of known space for decades. Learning, preparing, and waiting. Waiting for what? For someone to make the mistake the Vorthans are about to make. Before Kextara could respond, Alarms began sounding throughout the command center. The Vorthen fleet had detected the human arrival and was adjusting its formation. Warlord Vrextak's image appeared on screen without being summoned, his 6 eyes burning with fury. "What is this?" he demanded. "Who dares interfere with the Vorthen conquest? You primitives think your pathetic ships can stand against the might of the Empire?" Admiral Chen's image replaced Vrextak's on the main screen. The human admiral was no longer alone. Standing beside him was a figure that made even veteran spacers uncomfortable. Tall, wearing what appeared to be powered armor rather than a standard uniform, with a face that was somehow both human and something else entirely. "Warlord Vrextak," Chun said calmly. "This is Admiral Chun of the Terran Defense Force. You are in violation of Coalition space and have threatened member worlds. You will withdraw your fleet immediately and submit to Coalition authority for trial." Vrextak's laugh was like grinding metal. "You insects dare to threaten the Vorthen Empire? We have crushed fleets 10 times your size. We will add your ships to our trophies and your worlds to our conquests." "I was hoping you would say that," Chen replied, and something in his tone made Kextara's blood run cold. "All Terran vessels, this is Admiral Chun. You're authorized to engage. Weapons free. Show them what humanity learned in the dark between the stars." What happened next defied everything that military strategists thought they knew about space warfare. The human ships didn't advance in formation. Instead, they seemed to simply vanish from sensors for a moment before reappearing throughout the Vorthen formation. It was as if they had teleported, but that was impossible. No known technology could move large vessels instantaneously across such distances. "How do they do that?" Lieutenant Zill whispered, staring at his sensor display in disbelief. But Kextara was watching something else. The moment the human ships reappeared, every Vorthen vessel in the fleet simultaneously lost power. Not destroyed, not damaged, just dead. 3,000 ships, from massive dreadnoughts to nimble fighters, went dark in an instant. Total electromagnetic shutdown, her tactical officer reported, voice shaking. Every Vorthen ship just lost power simultaneously. "I'm reading no energy signatures, no life support, no weapons, nothing." "That's impossible." Captain Moldar's voice crackled through the comm. "There's no weapon that can affect that many targets across such a wide area." Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication system, calm and matter-of-fact. "Warlord Vrextak, your fleet is now disabled. Your ship's computer systems have been permanently corrupted, your weapons are inoperable, and your life support systems will function for approximately 6 hours. You have a choice. You can surrender now and face trial according to Coalition law, or you can drift in space until your air runs out. Either way, your conquest of Coalition space ends here." Kextara realized her hands were shaking as she watched the impossible scene playing out on her displays. 3,000 Vorthen warships, the most feared fleet in the galaxy, floating helpless in space. Not a single human ship showed any sign of damage. "Admiral Chun," she managed to say, "what just happened? What kind of weapon can do that?" "No weapon, Admiral Kextara." What you witnessed was a coordinated cyber warfare attack. Every Vorthen ship in that fleet was infiltrated simultaneously, and their systems were corrupted beyond repair. It's a technique we developed through careful study of their technology. But how did you get close enough to infiltrate their systems? Your ships were never in weapons range. Our ships didn't need to get close. The infiltration was carried out by assets that have been in place for quite some time. Assets? What kind of assets? Chen's expression became something that might have been a smile, but there was no warmth in it. "Admiral, for the past 5 years, every piece of Vorthen technology that entered Coalition space has been carefully examined. Every captured wreck, every disabled ship, every piece of salvage. We've learned how their systems work, how they communicate, how they think. And we've been preparing. Preparing for what? For the day they made the mistake of threatening Coalition space while humans were part of the Coalition. You see, Admiral, there's something your intelligence services never understood about humanity. We don't just explore space. We don't just build colonies and trade routes. We prepare for war. Always. It's what we do." The communication shifted to show the mysterious figure in powered armor. When it spoke, its voice was definitely human, but there was something else underneath it, something that suggested modifications that went beyond simple technology. "Admiral Kextara, this is Commander Reaper, Special Operations Division. Our infiltration teams have been operating in Vorthen space for 3 years. Every major installation, every fleet concentration, every command center. We've been watching, learning, and preparing for this moment. Infiltration teams? In Vorthen space? How is that possible? Because everyone underestimates humans, Admiral, including the Vorthens. They never imagined that those primitive exploration ships they occasionally encountered were actually reconnaissance vessels. They never suspected that those human merchants they occasionally dealt with were intelligence operatives. And they certainly never imagined that we were systematically mapping their entire empire. Kextara felt reality shifting around her. Everything she thought she knew about humanity, about their capabilities, about their place in the galaxy, was crumbling. The Vorthens aren't the only ones who made that mistake, Chun continued. For 20 years, the Coalition has seen exactly what we wanted you to see. Harmless explorers, eager merchants, friendly neighbors. But we've been preparing for this day since the moment we learned we weren't alone in the universe. Preparing for what? For the day we would need to protect our new home among the stars. The day someone would threaten the Coalition that welcomed us. The day we would need to show the galaxy what humanity is really capable of when everything we care about is at stake. On the screen, Warlord Vrextak's image flickered back to life. The proud warlord was no longer projecting confidence. His eyes showed something that no one had ever seen in a Vorthen before: fear. "This is impossible," he said, his translator struggling with what seemed to be panic in his voice. "Your technology is primitive. Your ships are inferior. How can you have done this?" Chen's response was delivered with the calm certainty of absolute victory. "Because you made the same mistake everyone makes when they encounter humanity for the first time. You mistook our restraint for weakness. You confused our preference for peace with an inability to wage war. You thought that because we were new to the galaxy, we were naive about its dangers. But we are the Vorthen Empire. We have conquered 17 systems. We are the apex predators of this galaxy." Chen corrected quietly. "You were apex predators. Right up until you threatened the one species in this galaxy that evolved from apex predators. The difference is we learned to be something more dangerous than predators. We learned to be survivors. And survivors, Warlord, always find a way to win." The transmission ended, leaving Station Omega 7 in complete silence as 3,000 Vorthen warships drifted helplessly in space, and a human fleet that shouldn't exist maintained perfect formation around them. The galaxy had just learned that there were predators, and then there were humans. The aftermath of the Vorthen fleet's neutralization brought an eerie quiet to the space around Station Omega 7. Admiral Kextara found herself staring at tactical displays that showed an impossible scene. 3,000 of the most feared warships in the galaxy floating dead in space, while human vessels that shouldn't exist maintained perfect formation around them. "Admiral," Lieutenant Zill's voice was barely above a whisper, "I'm receiving surrender transmissions from multiple Vorthen vessels. They're requesting permission to abandon ship. Forward those requests to Admiral Chun." Kextara replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "He has tactical command." As if summoned by her words, Chen's image appeared on the main display. The human admiral looked completely calm, as if disabling the galaxy's most feared fleet was just another routine operation. "Admiral Kextara, we're beginning recovery operations. Coalition vessels are requested to maintain position while we secure the area. This may take some time. Admiral Chun, I need to understand what just happened. The Coalition Council will demand answers, and frankly, so do I." Chun nodded slowly. "You're right, of course. But first, there's something you need to see. With your permission, I'm sending a shuttle to collect you and your senior staff. It's time you learned who humanity really is." 20 minutes later, Kextara found herself aboard a human shuttle that was unlike anything in Coalition records. The interior was spacious and comfortable, but every surface spoke of advanced technology. The pilot was human, but, like Commander Reaper, there was something different about him. His movements were too precise, his reflexes too fast, and when he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that suggested modifications beyond normal human physiology. "Ma'am," the pilot said as they approached the human flagship, "welcome aboard the TDF Prometheus. Admiral Chun is waiting for you in the briefing room." The docking bay they entered was massive, easily capable of handling hundreds of shuttles. But what caught Kextara's attention were the other craft present. sleek fighters that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Transport ships with hull configurations that defied conventional design. And, in the corner, something that made her blood run cold. A ship that was clearly of Vorthan design, but modified with human technology. "We've been busy," a familiar voice said behind her. Kextara turned to see Commander Reaper approaching, his powered armor making no sound on the deck plating. 20 years is a long time to prepare for a war that everyone hoped would never come. "Commander, that ship, that's a Vorthan vessel." "Was. Now it's a test platform. We've been reverse engineering their technology for years. Every piece of wreckage, every disabled ship, every defector who managed to escape their territory. It all comes here eventually." They were escorted through corridors that reinforced the impression of a vessel built for war. Everything was functional, efficient, and designed for maximum effectiveness. Personnel moved with military precision, and Kextara noticed that while all appeared human, many showed signs of augmentation. Enhanced reflexes, improved coordination, and in some cases, visible cybernetic integration. "How many?" she asked quietly. "How many what, Admiral? How many people know about this? About what humanity has really been doing for the past 20 years? Commander Reaper was quiet for a moment. "On the human side, maybe 10,000 people have clearance to know about the Deep Fleet. On the Coalition side, you're the first." They entered a briefing room that could have accommodated 100 people, but currently held only Admiral Chun and a handful of other senior officers. The humans rose as Kextara entered, a show of respect that seemed oddly formal given what had just transpired. "Please sit," Chun said, gesturing to a chair at the large central table. "I know you have questions, and you deserve answers. But first, I want you to understand something. Everything I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels of human government. You're being granted access because the situation has changed, and because you trusted us enough to invoke Treaty 847B. Kextara took the offered seat, her senior officers arranging themselves around her. "Admiral Chun, I need to understand what the Coalition has been allied with for 20 years. Are humans actually the peaceful exploration species you've presented yourselves as?" "We are," Chun replied without hesitation. "Everything you've seen of humanity in Coalition space is genuine. Our colonies are peaceful, our merchants are honest, our explorers are driven by curiosity rather than conquest. But that's only part of who we are." A holographic display activated above the table, showing a three-dimensional map of local space. Human territory was highlighted in blue, but as Kextara watched, additional areas began appearing in different shades. "What you've known as human space is what we call the inner colonies," Chen explained. "Peaceful worlds, trade centers, research stations. But beyond that, there's something else." The display expanded, showing vast regions of space that extended far beyond the mapped boundaries of Coalition territory. Hundreds of systems, thousands of installations, entire sectors that appeared to be under human control. "The outer territories," Commander Reaper said, his modified voice carrying notes of something that might have been pride. "Worlds that exist beyond the edge of known space, systems that don't appear on any Coalition star charts, installations that have been operating in secret for decades." "But why?" Lieutenant Zill asked, speaking for the first time since coming aboard. "Why hide this from the Coalition?" Chen's expression became more serious. "Because when humanity first encountered galactic civilization, we made a decision. We could either be honest about our capabilities and likely face suspicion, fear, or attempts to control us, or we could appear harmless while we learned everything we could about our new neighbors. So you chose deception. We chose survival," another voice said from the entrance to the briefing room. Kextara turned to see a woman approaching who carried herself with the authority of high command. She was older than the others, with gray hair and scars that spoke of combat experience. "Admiral Kextara," Chun said, rising, "this is Fleet Admiral Sarah Chun, my sister and commander of the Deep Fleet." The family resemblance was clear, but where Admiral Chun projected calm competence, Fleet Admiral Chun radiated something more dangerous. This was someone who had seen combat, who had made hard decisions, and who had survived when survival seemed impossible. "Admiral," the human woman said, taking a seat across from Kextara, "when humanity first achieved interstellar flight, we discovered we weren't alone. That discovery should have been cause for celebration, but our initial survey missions found something else. We found evidence of civilizations that had been conquered, worlds that had been strip-mined, species that had been enslaved or exterminated. The holographic display shifted, showing what appeared to be archaeological sites on dead worlds. We learned that the galaxy was a dangerous place, full of species that viewed others as resources to be exploited. The Coalition was a bright spot in that darkness, but even they had been shaped by that reality. They had learned to be cautious, defensive, reactive. But you chose to be proactive, Kextaros said, beginning to understand. We chose to be prepared. The inner colonies joined the Coalition, presented humanity as explorers and traders, and began the long process of integration. But the outer territories began preparing for the day when someone would threaten our new home. Fleet Admiral Chun activated new displays, showing ships and installations that dwarfed anything Kextara had imagined possible. Shipyards hidden in rogue systems, research stations studying technologies that most species consider impossible, training facilities where our best and brightest learn skills that officially don't exist. For 20 years, we've been preparing for this day. The day you would reveal yourselves? The day someone would force us to reveal ourselves, Admiral Chin corrected. We would have been happy to remain in the shadows indefinitely, letting the galaxy believe we were harmless explorers. But the Vorthans made that impossible. How long have you known about the Vorthan threat? Commander Reaper answered, his artificial voice carrying notes of satisfaction. We've been tracking them since their first conquest 5 years ago. When they began moving toward Coalition space, we knew it was only a matter of time before they would threaten systems we cared about. So you prepared for this specific scenario? We prepared for every scenario, Fleet Admiral Chin said. The Vorthans are just the first threat we've encountered that required a full response. The holographic display shifted again, showing detailed intelligence files on dozens of other species and organizations. Kextara recognized some of them as known threats, but others were completely unfamiliar. The hegemony of Keth, currently building a war fleet in the Outer Rim. The Swarm Collective, expanding through uncharted systems toward Coalition territory. The Machine Cult, attempting to create artificial intelligences that could overwhelm biological species. We've been watching all of them, and preparing to fight all of them, preparing to protect Coalition space from all of them, Admiral Chin corrected. The Coalition welcomed us, gave us a place in galactic civilization, and offered us the chance to be something better than just another aggressive species fighting for survival. In return, we made a commitment to protect that civilization, even if it meant revealing capabilities we preferred to keep secret. Kextara sat back in her chair, trying to process the magnitude of what she was being told. How many ships are in this deep fleet? Currently operational? Just over 12,000 vessels of various classes. Fleet Admiral Chun replied matter-of-factly. Another 8,000 in various stages of construction or refit. 20,000 ships. The entire Coalition Navy had maybe 5,000 vessels, and most of those were patrol craft and transports. The humans had been quietly building a fleet 4 times larger than the rest of galactic civilization combined. Where did you get the resources for such a massive undertaking? The outer territories are rich in raw materials, Commander Reaper explained. Uninhabited systems with asteroid belts, gas giants, and stellar phenomena that provided everything we needed. Plus, we've been developing manufacturing technologies that are significantly more efficient than Coalition standard. And personnel? You need millions of people to crew that many ships. Admiral Chin's expression became more guarded. That's where things get complicated. Some of our crews are volunteers from the inner colonies, people who know the truth and chose to serve. Others are from recruitment programs in the outer territories. What kind of recruitment programs? Admiral, Fleet Admiral Chun said carefully, humanity didn't just expand into uninhabited systems. We also encountered isolated human populations that had been lost during our early expansion attempts, groups that had adapted to survive in hostile environments, and other situations. The implication was clear and disturbing. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of known space, humanity had been growing and changing in ways that the Coalition had never suspected. There's something else you need to understand, Admiral Chin continued. The crews you've seen today, the personnel aboard these ships, they're not quite the same as the humans in Coalition space. In what way? Commander Reaper stepped forward and, for the first time, removed his helmet. The face revealed was human, but it had been modified in ways that went beyond simple cybernetics. Enhanced bone structure, improved muscle density, and most disturbing of all, eyes that reflected light like a predator's. We've been adapting ourselves for survival in environments that would kill unmodified humans. Deep space operations, high radiation areas, combat situations that require reflexes and durability beyond normal human limits. You've been modifying yourselves. We've been evolving, Fleet Admiral Chun said simply. Controlled evolution, directed adaptation, but evolution nonetheless. The humans who crew the Deep Fleet are still human, but they're human in ways that our ancestors couldn't have imagined. The briefing room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Coalition had allied itself with a species that was not only more powerful than anyone had suspected, but was actively changing itself in ways that pushed the boundaries of what it meant to be human. There's one more thing, Admiral Chin said quietly. The treaty provisions that granted us tactical authority over this engagement, they weren't just legal formalities. They were recognition protocols. Recognition protocols? Acknowledgement that humanity has been serving as the Coalition's unofficial defense force for 2 decades. Every threat that was dealt with quietly, every aggressive species that mysteriously changed course, every pirate organization that simply disappeared, that was us. The pieces began falling into place in Kextara's mind. All those mysterious incidents, all those unexplained resolutions to potential crises, all those times when threats to Coalition space simply vanished without explanation. You've been protecting us all along. We've been protecting the civilization that welcomed us, Fleet Admiral Chun confirmed. The question now is what happens next. The galaxy has seen what happens when someone threatens Coalition space while humanity is part of the Coalition. The secret is out. And that changes everything, Admiral Chun added. For better or worse, the galaxy now knows that humanity is not what it appeared to be. How they react to that knowledge will determine whether we continue to operate in the shadows or whether we step fully into the light. Kextara looked around the briefing room at faces that were human, but somehow more than human, at displays showing capabilities that defied everything she thought she knew about galactic power structures, and realized that they had just crossed a threshold that could never be uncrossed. The galaxy would never be the same again. The journey back to Station Omega 7 passed in contemplative silence. Admiral Kextara stared out the shuttle's viewport at the massive human fleet that had appeared from nowhere, each vessel a testament to 20 years of secret preparation. Her mind raced with implications that stretched far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Admiral, Lieutenant Zill said quietly, breaking the silence. How do we report this to Coalition Command? It was the question she had been dreading. How do you explain to your superiors that your understanding of galactic power structures was completely wrong? How do you tell them that humanity, the species everyone had dismissed as harmless explorers, possessed a military capability that dwarfed the rest of the galaxy combined? Carefully, she replied. And truthfully, upon their return to the station, Kextara found herself facing a communications array that had been modified with human technology. The jamming that had prevented long-range communication was gone, replaced by a clarity and range that exceeded anything in Coalition specifications. Human engineers worked on it while we were away, Communications Officer THYSS explained. They said it would allow us to reach Coalition Command with full security protocols. The first response came from Admiral Vector, commander of the Coalition's 7th Fleet, and Kextara's immediate superior. His image appeared on the main display, and, even through the holographic projection, his agitation was obvious. Kextara, we've been trying to reach you for hours. The Vorthan offensive they've just stopped. Completely. Every fleet in their territory has gone dark. Our intelligence services are reporting system-wide communications failures throughout Vorthan space. What's your situation? The immediate threat has been neutralized, Admiral. The Vorthan fleet that approached our position has been disabled and is currently under guard. Disabled? By what? Our nearest reinforcements are still 12 hours out, and the Vorthans had overwhelming tactical superiority. Kextara took a deep breath. Sir, I invoke Coalition Treaty 847B and requested assistance from the Terran Defense Force. Vector's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. The humans? Kextara, what could they possibly have done? Their entire fleet is weight. His eyes narrowed as he noticed something in the background of her transmission. What am I looking at behind you? Those are human vessels, sir. The ones that responded to our request for assistance. The display automatically adjusted to show the exterior view of Station Omega 7, revealing the massive human ships maintaining formation around the disabled Vorthan fleet. Admiral Vectar's reaction was immediate and dramatic. By the ancient void, those ships, how many of them are there? Current count shows 237 vessels of various classes, Lieutenant Zill reported. That's impossible. Human fleet strength is less than 300 ships total, and most of those are exploration vessels. Vectar paused, clearly struggling to process what he was seeing. These are capital ships, dreadnought class or larger. Where do they come from? Admiral Kexteros said carefully, it appears that our intelligence regarding human military capabilities has been incomplete. The next several hours were filled with increasingly frantic communications as word spread through Coalition Command. Admiral Vectar was joined by other senior officers, then by representatives from the Coalition Council, and finally by species ambassadors who demanded to know what was happening in their space. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Disbelief, demands for explanation, and growing realization that the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted dramatically overnight. Admiral Kexteros came the voice of Counselor Euthera, the Altarian representative who chaired the Coalition Defense Committee. You are ordered to establish direct communication with the human commander and demand a full explanation of this deception. With respect, Counselor, the humans are operating under treaty provisions that grant them tactical authority over this engagement. They've been completely cooperative, but they're under no obligation to explain their capabilities to us. They are under obligation as coalition members to report significant military assets. Before Kexteros could respond, a new voice entered the communication channel. Actually, Counselor Euthera were not. Admiral Chen's image appeared on the display, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the agitation of the coalition officials. Admiral Chen, Counselor Euthera said, his translator struggling to convey his species' equivalent of indignation. You will explain how humanity has hidden such massive military assets from Coalition oversight. Counselor, I'd be happy to clarify the legal situation. Coalition membership requires reporting of military assets that operate within Coalition space. These vessels have been operating exclusively outside Coalition territory for the past 20 years. That's sophistry. You deliberately concealed your true capabilities. We disclosed exactly what the Coalition membership requirements demanded. No more, no less. If you wanted information about our operations outside Coalition space, you should have asked. The conversation that followed was heated, with Coalition officials demanding explanations and Admiral Chun calmly citing treaty provisions and legal precedents that apparently supported the human position. It became clear that humanity's legal advisors had been very thorough in their understanding of Coalition law. Furthermore, Chun continued, I should point out that under the emergency assistance protocols that were invoked, any Coalition member has the right to request aid from any other member without requiring advance approval or explanation of response capabilities. But the scale of this response, 24 hours ago, we believed human military capability was negligible. Now you're telling us you have a fleet that could challenge the entire Coalition Navy. Could challenge? Counselor, with respect, these ships could defeat the entire Coalition Navy. But that's not why they exist. The blunt statement silenced the channel for several moments. When Counselor Euthera spoke again, his voice carried a note of fear that hadn't been there before. Are you threatening the Coalition, Admiral Chun? Quite the opposite. We're protecting it. We've been protecting it for 20 years, dealing with threats that never reached Coalition attention because we eliminated them before they became problems. Admiral Chun activated a holographic display that was visible to all participants in the communication. It showed a three-dimensional map of local space with dozens of incident markers scattered throughout the region. The Kandor Pirate Confederation, eliminated 3 years ago before they could raid Coalition shipping lanes. The Vexton expansion redirected away from Coalition territory through targeted infrastructure disruption. The hegemony of Keth's advanced scout fleets, destroyed before they could report Coalition weaknesses back to their commanders. Each marker on the display represented a threat that had been dealt with quietly, efficiently, and without Coalition knowledge. Every species in this galaxy faces the same choice when they encounter potential threats, Chen continued. They can wait for those threats to become existential crises, or they can deal with them while they're still manageable. Humanity chose the second option. without consulting the coalition, without authorization. Counselor, exactly which coalition law requires us to seek permission before defending our own territory? Because that's what we were doing. Every action on that display involved threats to systems that were either human colonies or directly threatened human space. But you were also protecting coalition territory, because coalition territory and human territory overlap. Our colonies are coalition members. Our trade routes serve as coalition worlds. Our citizens are coalition citizens. When we protect our interests, we're protecting coalition interests. The logic was unassailable, and the coalition officials knew it. Humanity had found a way to build a massive military force and use it proactively while remaining technically within the bounds of coalition law. There's another issue, Admiral Vectar said, speaking for the first time in several minutes. The Vorthan Empire. You said their fleets have gone dark throughout their territory. What exactly did you do to them? We neutralized a threat to coalition space, Chen replied simply. All their fleets? Throughout their entire empire? How is that possible? Counselor Euthera, you asked earlier about humanity's true capabilities. The ships you see around Station Omega 7 represent a small fraction of our defensive assets. The operation against Vorthan space involved significantly more resources. A new display activated, showing real-time intelligence from throughout Vorthan territory. System after system showed the same pattern: disabled fleets, offline infrastructure, and communication blackouts. Every major Vorthan installation, every fleet concentration, every command center, Chen explained. Simultaneous strikes carried out by forces that have been in position for months. The Vorthan Empire, as a military threat, no longer exists. You destroyed an entire interstellar empire? In a single day, we disabled an aggressive military power that was threatening coalition space. The Vorthan civilian population is unharmed. Their worlds remain intact, but their ability to wage war has been permanently eliminated. The silence that followed was deafening. The coalition officials were processing the implications of what they had just learned. Humanity hadn't just revealed greater military capability than anyone suspected. They had demonstrated the ability to neutralize an entire interstellar empire in a coordinated operation that must have taken months or years to plan. Admiral Chun, Counselor Euthera said finally, what does humanity want? The same thing we've always wanted, Counselor. To be part of the galactic community. To explore, to trade, to learn, and to grow. The difference is that now you know we're capable of protecting that community when it's threatened. And if the coalition objects to your methods, to your deception, Chen's expression became more serious. Then, the coalition will need to decide whether it prefers to be defended by allies who work in the shadows, or whether it would rather face future threats without our assistance. Are you saying you'll withdraw from the coalition? I'm saying that the galaxy is a dangerous place, and threats to peaceful civilizations are constant and evolving. The coalition can face those threats with our help, or it can face them alone. But either way, humanity will continue to exist, and we will continue to protect our interests. The implication was clear. Humanity wasn't asking for permission or forgiveness. They were stating facts. The coalition could accept their methods and benefit from their protection, or they could object and lose access to capabilities that have been safeguarding galactic civilization for 2 decades. There will need to be discussions, Counselor Euthera said finally. The Council will need to convene, policies will need to be reviewed. Of course, Chen agreed. But while those discussions are taking place, I suggest you consider one thing. For 20 years, the coalition has enjoyed a period of relative peace and stability. Threats appeared and disappeared. Aggressive species changed course without explanation, and dangerous situations resolved themselves almost mysteriously. That wasn't luck, and it wasn't coincidence. It was us. And now? Now you know. The question is whether that knowledge makes the galaxy a safer place or a more dangerous one. That's up to you. The transmission ended, leaving the command center of Station Omega 7 in stunned silence. Outside, the human fleet maintained its perfect formation around the disabled Vorthan ships, a reminder that the galaxy had just learned it was under the protection of guardians it never knew existed. Admiral Kexthera looked at her staff, seeing her own thoughts reflected in their faces. Everything had changed. The question was whether it had changed for the better or whether humanity's revelation would destabilize the careful balance that had kept the galaxy relatively peaceful for so long. One thing was certain. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. 6 months had passed since the day that changed everything. Admiral Kextera stood in her new office aboard Coalition Defense Station Alpha Prime, looking out a view that would have been impossible to imagine before the Vorthan incident. Human ships moved through Coalition space openly now, their dark hulls and advanced designs no longer hidden from galactic view. The secret was out, and the galaxy was still adjusting to the new reality. The immediate aftermath had been chaotic. Emergency sessions of the Coalition Council, heated debates about sovereignty and transparency, demands for investigations and explanations. Some species had threatened to withdraw from the Coalition, claiming they couldn't trust an organization that had been unknowingly protected by a secret military force for 20 years. But as the weeks passed, a different pattern had emerged. The galaxy was safer than it had been in generations, and everyone knew why. Admiral, her aide announced, "The monthly intelligence briefing is ready for your review." Kextera accepted the datapad and scrolled through reports that told a story of unprecedented galactic stability. Pirate activity was down 87%. Aggressive species that had been expanding toward Coalition space had mysteriously redirected their efforts elsewhere. Even natural disasters seemed to be handled more efficiently, as human vessels appeared with relief supplies before official distress calls could be processed. The transformation hadn't been without controversy. 3 species had initially withdrawn from the Coalition, citing concerns about human manipulation and deception. But within weeks, they had quietly requested readmission after discovering that their borders were suddenly under pressure from aggressive neighbors who had previously been contained by human operations. "Ma'am," Communications Officer THYSS said, "Admiral Chun is requesting a meeting. He says it's about the hegemony situation." The hegemony of Keth had been testing Coalition resolve for months, probing border defenses and making increasingly aggressive demands for territory concessions. It was exactly the kind of slow-building crisis that had historically led to devastating wars. "Tell him I'll meet him in conference room 7 in 10 minutes. Admiral Chun arrived precisely on time, accompanied by Commander Reaper and another figure Kextera didn't recognize. The newcomer appeared human, but carried herself with the enhanced grace that marked the modified personnel of the Deep Fleet. "Admiral Kextera," Chun said, "I'd like you to meet Captain Sarah Kim, commander of Task Force Scalpel. She's been monitoring the hegemony situation." Captain Kim stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice carried the same artificial harmonics as Commander Reaper's. "Admiral, the hegemony has made a strategic error. They've interpreted the Coalition's restraint as weakness and have begun mobilizing for a major offensive. Our intelligence suggests they're planning to demand the cession of 12 border systems," Kextera replied. "The Council is considering various diplomatic responses. Diplomacy won't work with the hegemony," Chin said bluntly. "They're a militaristic society that views negotiation as admission of weakness. They're counting on the Coalition's reluctance to engage in preemptive action." "And you're suggesting we abandon that policy?" "I'm suggesting that the Coalition doesn't need to abandon anything. The hegemony threat can be resolved without Coalition forces firing a single shot." Kextera had learned to recognize that tone in Admiral Chen's voice. It meant that humanity had already developed a solution, probably one that the rest of the galaxy would find difficult to believe. "What are you proposing?" Captain Kim activated a holographic display that showed the hegemony's territory in detail. Red markers indicated military installations, fleet concentrations, and strategic resources. The hegemony's entire military structure depends on a centralized command and control system. Their fleets are coordinated through a network of communication relays and automated systems that we've been studying for the past 2 years. "Studying how?" "We have assets in place throughout their territory," Commander Reaper explained. "Deep cover operatives, modified surveillance systems, and data collection networks that have been gathering intelligence since the first signs of hegemony aggression." "You've infiltrated their entire empire?" "We've been preparing for the day they would threaten Coalition space," Chin corrected. "Which appears to be now." The display zoomed in to show individual hegemony systems, each one marked with detailed intelligence about military capabilities, resource production, and infrastructure vulnerabilities. The hegemony has approximately 8,000 vessels of various classes, Captain Kim continued. Impressive by most standards, but they suffer from a critical weakness. Their entire fleet relies on quantum-entangled communication systems for coordination. And you found a way to disrupt those systems? Better, we found a way to take control of them. The implications hit Kextara immediately. If humanity could control hegemony communications, they could effectively command the entire enemy fleet. You're talking about turning their own ships against them. We're talking about preventing a war that would cost millions of lives, Chen replied. The hegemony is preparing to launch an offensive that would devastate border worlds and potentially destabilize the entire sector. We can stop that from happening. By taking control of their fleet, by demonstrating that resistance is futile. When their own ships refuse to obey orders, when their command structure realizes that their communications are compromised, and when they understand that their military capability can be neutralized at will, they'll reconsider their aggressive policies. Kexaros studied the display, trying to grasp the scope of what was being proposed. This would be an act of war against a sovereign government. No, Chen said firmly. It would be a defensive action to prevent an act of war against coalition territory. The hegemony has already made their intentions clear. We're simply ensuring that those intentions can't be carried out. And afterward, what happens when the galaxy learns that humanity can take control of any fleet, anywhere, at any time? The question hung in the air for several moments before Admiral Chen answered. That depends on how the galaxy chooses to interpret that knowledge. They can see it as a threat, or they can see it as the ultimate guarantee of peace. A guarantee enforced by human power. A guarantee backed by the reality that aggressive wars are no longer possible. When any species that attempts military conquest knows that their own weapons can be turned against them, they tend to find diplomatic solutions more attractive. It was a chilling prospect, but Kextara had to admit it was also compelling. A galaxy where war was impossible because the most advanced military power could neutralize any aggressor before they could cause significant damage. The Coalition Council will never approve this operation, she said finally. The Coalition Council doesn't need to approve it, Chen replied. This falls under the same treaty provisions that authorized our response to the Vorthan threat. As long as Coalition territory is threatened, we have the authority to respond as we see fit. But the political ramifications... Admiral, Commander Reaper interrupted. May I speak frankly? Kextara nodded. The political ramifications of allowing the hegemony to launch their offensive would be far worse than the ramifications of preventing it. Border worlds would be devastated, millions would die, and the coalition would face exactly the kind of existential crisis it was created to prevent. And you're certain you can neutralize the hegemony threat without significant casualties? We're certain we can neutralize their military capability, Captain Kim replied. As for casualties, our projections suggest minimal losses on both sides. Most hegemony personnel will simply find their ships no longer responding to commands. Kextara walked to the viewport and looked out at the human ships that had become a common sight in Coalition space. 6 months ago, their presence would have been impossible to imagine. Now, they were a visible reminder that the galaxy was under the protection of a power that most species still didn't fully understand. When would this operation take place? It's already begun, Chen said quietly. Kexaros spun around to face him. What, Admiral? The hegemony was planning to launch their offensive in 72 hours. We couldn't wait for political discussions that might take weeks or months. Assets have been in position for days, and the operation commenced when it became clear that diplomatic solutions were impossible. You're telling me that right now, as we speak, human forces are taking control of the hegemony fleet? We're telling you that right now, the threat to coalition border worlds is being permanently eliminated. Before Kextara could respond, her communication panel activated with an urgent priority signal. The image that appeared was Admiral Vector, and his expression was a mixture of amazement and concern. Kextara, are you monitoring long-range communications from hegemony space? No, sir. What are we seeing? Complete communications breakdown throughout their territory. Every major installation has gone dark, and their fleet formations they've stopped. All of them, simultaneously. Admiral Chun stepped into the communication pickup range. Admiral Vector, this is Admiral Chun. The hegemony threat has been neutralized. Neutralized how? We haven't received any authorization for military action. Sir, the operation was conducted under emergency protocols. The hegemony was hours away from launching a major offensive against coalition territory. And now, they're no longer capable of launching any offensive. Their military command structure has been compromised, their fleet coordination has been disrupted, and their ability to wage war has been eliminated. Admiral Vector was quiet for several moments before responding. Admiral Chun, what you're describing, the ability to neutralize an entire interstellar military force without engaging them directly, this changes everything. Yes, sir. It does. The Council will need to be briefed immediately. This level of capability, the implications, are significant, Chun agreed. But consider this, Admiral. How many coalition citizens are alive today because the hegemony offensive was prevented? How many worlds remain intact because their fleets were neutralized before they could launch their attack? It was a compelling argument, and everyone in the room knew it. The mathematics of galactic warfare were brutal. Major conflicts killed millions, devastated entire systems, and could destabilize regions for generations. If humanity could prevent such conflict from occurring, the moral calculus became complex. There will be consequences, Admiral Vector warned. There are always consequences, Chun replied. The question is whether we prefer the consequences of action or the consequences of inaction. The communication ended, leaving the conference room in contemplative silence. Outside, normal coalition activities continued, citizens going about their daily lives unaware that another potential war had been prevented before it could begin. Admiral Kexthara, Chun said finally, I want you to understand something. Humanity didn't seek this responsibility. We didn't want to become the galaxy's unofficial peacekeepers. But we found ourselves in a position where we could prevent suffering on a massive scale, and we chose to act. And now the galaxy knows what we're capable of. Some species will see that as a threat. Others will see it as protection. Both perspectives are valid. What do you see it as? Admiral Chun was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the human ships that patrolled coalition space with quiet efficiency. I see it as responsibility. The responsibility that comes with power. The responsibility to use that power wisely, judiciously, and always in service of peace rather than conquest. And if the galaxy decides it doesn't want that kind of protection, then the galaxy will need to find another way to maintain peace and stability. But I suspect that once people understand the alternative, they'll choose the protection we can provide. As if to underscore his point, the communication panel activated again. This time it was Counselor Euthera, and his message was brief and direct. Admiral Chun, the Coalition Council has reviewed the hegemony situation. While we have concerns about the methods used, we cannot argue with the results. The Council would like to discuss formalizing humanity's role in coalition defense. After the transmission ended, Kexthara found herself thinking about the galaxy that was emerging from these events. A galaxy where major wars could be prevented before they started, where aggressive species found themselves unable to carry out their conquest plans, where peace was maintained not through negotiation and deterrence, but through the absolute certainty that military aggression would fail. It was a new kind of peace, enforced by a species that had somehow become the galaxy's guardian without anyone realizing it was happening. Whether that was a good thing or a dangerous precedent remained to be seen. But as she watched human ships moving through coalition space with quiet efficiency, protecting worlds, and citizens who might never even know they had been in danger, Admiral Kexthara realized that perhaps the most remarkable thing about humanity wasn't their advanced technology or their military capabilities. It was their choice to use that power to protect others rather than to conquer them. The battle had indeed been hopeless until they summoned the one species everyone feared. But it turned out that the most feared species in the galaxy was also the most dedicated to ensuring that such battles would never be necessary again. The galaxy was learning to sleep peacefully, watched over by guardians who preferred to remain in the shadows, emerging only when the darkness threatened to overwhelm the light.